Hey everybody, welcome to the Coffeehouse Conversations podcast, and I'm your host, Amos St. John. Welcome back. For those if it's your first time, thank you for tuning in, and for those who are returning, again, thank you. If this is your first time, if this is your first episode, feel free to go back and check out previous episodes. The last episode I talked about starting from scratch and shared 6 action plans to help you to get into the road of success, man. Make sure you go back and check that out. On today, I have a very great friend of mine, a brother of mine, Jamar Jones, who's an extremely well-decorated music industry vet, expert in ministry, administration, executive. I mean, this guy, I don't want to start talking about his resume, but he's my brother. That's all that matters. Jamar Jones, welcome to the podcast, man.
So glad to be joining you. Thank you for having me. This is amazing. Proud of you, as my brother, and glad that you're out helping the people that want to be helped.
Man, let me give a backstory. This actually Coffeehouse Conversations podcast, it stemmed from a conversation I was having with my brother in a coffee house, a Starbucks.
Yeah, man.
Last year, and when I was in a very pivotal moment of my life where I was just talking about before, I was very frustrated with the lack of progress or productivity in my life. And we were just talking about just life and the nuggets that he shared and that conversation and the ironing and the iron sharpening's iron conversation we had. I left there like, the year 2019 is going to be a very great year, based on that conversation I had with you. So I just have to give you props, man. You really helped me push and do this podcast, man. So I got to give you your props, man. Not even just this podcast. I gotta give a backstory. I really don't think I would be in Dallas
Well,
if it wasn't for your brotherhood, man. You were a very, very vital instrument.
Wow.
In helping and enlightening my wife and I that Dallas was going to be our home.
Yeah. Well, hey. Well, you know what? Here, I often think of Dallas as being a place where there's just a lot of land, and the land is fertile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can opportunities here. It connects the East Coast and the West Coast. It's the heartbeat of America. The cost of living is lower. Yeah. So, it's a great place to raise your family. Plus, you have other incentives for you and your wife being here, which it all plays, in it. But I'm glad to have been a part of your journey,
brother, man. And these are just very significant years. Almost these last 3 years. I don't say it trumps the last 37 years, but it was because I'm an adult now.
Yeah,
I'm turning 40. You're a little older than I am, so you kind of
just
help.
a year older.
But you've kind of helped. I glean from you. Like, okay, so that's what I need to prepare for in my own special way. But like these last 3 years, transitioning from 30s into the 40s, like being a family man.
Yeah.
My decision making shifted drastically because we can easily reflect in the days when it was like, let's go. Like, let's make mistakes. Let's just jump off the cliff and let's just go for broke and don't care about, consequences. Now, like, life has changed, and like every step you take, you have to consider.
Yeah, there are other lives in the boat.
Yeah.
To consider. I mean, which is we all go through that. I remember being a young man when we first got married. We lived in Westchester, Pennsylvania, so about 45 minutes out from Philadelphia. But I was always in Philly. My life was in Philly. Yeah. So me and my wife, my newlywed, we lived 45 minutes away, and I drove home so tired, so many nights. I don't even know how I made it home because we would work like around the clock and around the clock, whether it's at the studio and then at the studio, then go to church and then go from church back to the studio and then go home at 5 a.m. and you don't know how you got home. You just know you made it. But at the moment that my daughter was born, that all ceased. It was almost like it was instantaneous. Wow. Jamar, you are now responsible for another life. and you can't live recklessly. And then of course that plays into your financial decisions, just your social decisions, and the people that you interact. And then you have 2 children, and it's like, oh my God. Then you have 3 children. It's like, oh my, like what am I doing? Like, you know what I mean? But then of course you can't just jump off cliffs. Now you have to really. You got to get a running start to jump off the cliff. It doesn't mean you won't jump off one, but now you plan like, okay, this is how I'm gonna make it over this. Like, because now I have all these other lives to consider and these people. And then of course now our oldest is now 17, getting ready to go to college. And then after her, the 15-year-old, and then after her, the 13-year-old. And guess what? Me and her mom, me and their mom, we just go jump off cliffs again.
Let's go.
You know,
it's like the cycle of life. And it's interesting. I got a 5-year-old, and so I'm experiencing it from a whole different perspective. Now, when they were 5 years old, we were almost living in a different world. This
is true. This is very true. I mean, when my youngest was 5, that was in 2006.
Wow.
so
that was like there wasn't much of this big social media bubble, and I'll keep talking about that. Like, parenting now you're parenting teenagers, so that's even more scary because they kind of have their mind of their own. It's like you're like you can create the restrictions, but they're smart enough now to kind of. But me, I still have that restriction. I'm the law. She knows that I'm the law. Like, give me another 3-5 years, that's gone. Like,
it ain't no telling what social media is gonna be like by the time Gracie is 13,
bro.
Because technology moves so fast, so. I did some work with the Mansfield Independent School District here, where we talked about kind of setting some rules up for how the district would create their new plans going forward. And one of the things that I highlighted was the digital realm that we're now in. True. So with everything being digital, I think we need to not just teach citizenship to our kids, but we need to teach them digital citizenship. Wow. It's very important because
jobs look at it like it's part of your fingerprint.
It's your fingerprint.
It's just as vital as, remember back in the days, like I don't know about you, but I used to go to a check cashing place and you got to use your thumb as your fingerprint. Yeah. Like that was law. Yeah. Now your digital, like everything is just as vital. Like your Facebook posts, your history. Like people are going down by posts they did 5 years ago.
Right. Or something they said when they were a teenager, and now you're 30 years old, or. Like, it's just so much now to take into consideration where, that's the problem. Our kids now, it's things that we might have said in 1995.
You can't say that.
But you left to whoever was around that may have heard you.
Listen.
And hopefully most people just didn't remember that you said something crazy. Like, you know what I mean? And now you're running for president. Well, it's your word against my word.
All them skeletons, man.
But now their skeletons are not. I mean, they're skeletons. We can go back to, April the 14th, 2017. This is what you posted on Instagram.
Quickly. No matter if you deleted it, they still have. And so, we have to kind of teach. You're right. You have to kind of teach your kids not just regular citizenship, but digital citizenship. How do you exist in the world now from a digital aspect? And for me, it's scary because, like you said, the world is forever evolving.
Yeah.
And you said 5 years from now, well, Lord knows what's the next bubble. And I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about artificial intelligence. It scared the crap out of me because that's the next wave.
It is. Driving our cars it's already infiltrating a lot of things that's happening now, but it's going to be making some decisions for you that you may not want necessarily made for you, or we're going to raise a newer generation of people that are going to be used to decisions being made for them. Jeez. So now think about what that's a war that would be coming, an intergenerational war that'll occur from people that are used to making their own decisions about where you want to go and what you want to eat, to now artificial intelligence says, like, you know what, you imagine, you walk in a place and it says like, yo, based on your height and your weight, you don't need to eat any carbs today, so we're not going to sell you any. Like, imagine that.
And that's real. Like, we used to look at movies in the 90s and 80s and be like, man, that's far-fetched. We're living in it now.
Yeah, we're literally living in it. Like, yo, man, I can program music on Logic. I love the drummer plugin.
Yeah.
Because now,
it's so real.
Yeah, it's so real. All I got to do is pull up the drummer plugin, and click the style that I need, and I can get a performance like instantaneous. So it's going to take that. And now I'm going to be out of work once they start doing that with string arrangements.
Man, but what do you do? Like, it's just a constant movement. It's a constant evolution. And for me, like, even with my kids, my family, just me as a newly 40-year-old, like, you know, we were like back in the days, we used to laugh at our uncles. Like, yo, look at them. Like, now I'm that uncle.
Yes, it's true.
Now I'm that old head. Like, man, you don't know nothing about this. Like, what? What you talking about? That was just me yesterday.
It
like,
was just 20 years ago. Bro.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah.
that constant movement, like, it's starting to become a struggle for me, because it's like, yo, how do I keep up? It's forever. I just got used to this. Now I got to be introduced to this. Then, like, all this is happening. Then 5 years from now, it's like a whole nother thing. Then my daughter's going to start teaching me stuff.
Mhm.
How do you regulate that? And so life, it's just interesting. Like, life, when it moves, I can even talk about my move from Maryland, D.C., Virginia area, DMV, to the Dallas area.
Yeah.
And that shift from the culture of the East Coast to come into the South, like, I just the Midwest, like, so like adjusting to that pace, like, cost of living is amazing and all that stuff, and adjusting to this culture. I mean, all these adjustments. Then I'm in this sphere of life. I'm changing from 30s to 40s. So, like, all this is happening, and I'm so thankful. Again, I'm thankful for having the right people around me.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, yeah.
Because if you're making these pivotal life decisions, or going through trauma, or going through all this stuff, if you don't surround yourself with wise counsel,
very true.
You know, you may jump off the cliff and never come back.
Yeah,
literally. So I'm thankful, like I said, having brothers like you, and I always encourage people, like, yo, surround yourself with wise counsel.
Yeah.
And I mean, we don't have enough of that. Like, this new generation scared for brotherhood, because it's like competition. Like, I want to be better than you. I want to have more money. I want to flex more than you. And it's
you know what? I'm not sure that they're scared of it. I think that it's manifested in much the wrong way.
Okay.
Good. So if you look at something like the history of, I'm going to go as far as saying that's the history of discrimination in the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, that gave birth to a whole generation of kids of color that had no place to go to where they could belong. And as I understand it appropriately, there was those generation of kids ended up forming what we call gangs, which would have been no more than just a cohort of belonging. Yeah. And then those kids had kids who were a part of gangs.
Wow.
You get what I'm saying?
And
so
that's
like
a whole civilization. It's a whole thing.
It's a whole civilization. It's something that's birthed out of a need to have community and brotherhood. Wow. It just may have taken on some things that have made those obviously behaviors that ended up becoming menaces to society, so to speak. Wow. You know, so, and that's just one way to look at it. I think that every human being seeks to feel like I belong to something, whether it's a family, whether it's a group, whether it's a club, whether it's a cohort. We all have a sense of belonging because we were created. Like, I heard Bishop Jakes talk about this one time. God didn't design us to love without another person. True. So, that's like, I
mean, it's biblical, yeah.
Yeah, it's biblical. It's community is like love and sharing. Like, I can't share with myself. Like, I can only share with you. Yeah. So, which is why brotherhood, sisterhood, and all of those things, I think a lot of our societal ills stem from that. So people wanting to belong to a group, whether it's Democrats is the group you want to be with, the Republicans is the group you want to be with. There's some other social groups that I shall not name since this is a public broadcast, but that people want to be with. Because that is it has much to do with, you know, I feel like I belong here, as opposed to us having what's that, the Romans chapter 12, love without dissimulation. Love that assembles us together. You know what I mean? Which should be the Christian behavior, but we don't have that oftentimes. Listen, you know what I mean?
And I'm always professed that I am clearly a Christian believer, and for those who are not, you have to understand, like, that's kind of like the way our blood pumps. You know, like how you survive through changing times without, you know, belief system, belonging to something. And so for me and for us, when we refer to, I mentioned in my last podcast about the Bible being my favorite book in the world, because it has brought me through some difficult times where I felt alone.
That's good.
And even in the church, they say, God is the father to the fatherless. He's the mother to the motherless. Like, when you go through real times when you're alone, and you know what I'm saying, we're fortunate to have that belonging in Christ. So what happens when the people feel abandoned? Like, what happens when people feel rejected? Like, even let's bring it to, our field of music, and even in churches, like, where we have a lot of musicians, creatives who are, great creatives, but personally they have crises. You know what I'm saying? Like, family, they didn't grow up with, a community, but they have this gift. And so it's like they're constantly looking for places to belong. They become chameleons. Like, I'm gonna be this. I'm gonna be this persuasion. I'm gonna be this, that. Like, identity is in this generation is a very, very touchy subject.
Yeah, there's a point, but there's a larger point that I think you're hinting at, which would have to do with the fact that outward expression is really an effect, but is not the cause. Identity crisis is not the cause. That's an outward expression of a deeper root cause. And then, so of course, you highlighted a cause just a second ago when you talked about a generation that may have felt abandoned. As I felt abandoned, anyone that knows my story, I have a record out called Fatherless Child, which helps me to help an audience understand how I dealt with the process through resolving from abandonment issues. Now, that's the thing. Like, abandonment being the trauma, trauma has emotional expression, which would be our outward thing that we see, right? So I was blessed. It was by the gift of God that I had an artistic outlet, which I often liken to being a chimney on my heart. So as opposed to it coming out in aggression in hand with my physical hands, it came out in musical notes and melodies and compositions and stuff like that. So while my intent might have been to be aggressive in the music, well, it's music. It's art. That's art. That's artistic expression is what it is, as opposed to me being aggressive with my hands and punching somebody in the face. Guess what? Aggravated assault and playing the piano are both the same exact thing.
Wow.
They are expressions of emotion, not artistic expressions. But if you're a boxer, it is an artistic
it's part
expression.
of your art.
But nevertheless, it becomes like this the thing. So like, as art in the artistic community, we get the opportunity to have expressions oftentimes through our art itself. So I've coined this term that we have trauma-informed artistic expression. In most cases, like, it's trauma-informed if you've gone through some type of trauma. Not to say everybody will have gone through trauma. I get that. I'm not saying that. But for those that have gone through it, regardless of what it is, a subtle trauma to a not so subtle trauma, it plays out in your life. And if you're an artist, well, for me, it comes out in my piano playing. If for a drummer, it could come out in his drumming. For a creative writer, it comes out in their writing. People express it through that lens, and for that matter, it helps sometimes. But when it goes undiagnosed, it also can be unhealthy. And we have a whole host of artists that we can look at that probably had, in my opinion, undiagnosed traumas in some forms and some things that weren't dealt with. And it didn't necessarily happen in adulthood either. It goes back way farther than that, as we know from psychological theory and psychosocial theory. And it would be like Whitney Houston and Prince and Michael Jackson and Amy Winehouse. The list could go on and on and on of people that were so amazing at what they did, and yet we applauded for the art, but we didn't really care for the person much in the way that we should have.
So for me, you mentioned about your fatherlessness. For me, my mother passed away at 19. The year the age of 19. That's a very pivotal age. That's kind of like before young adulthood, like you could transit out a teenager. So in the last 20 years, I didn't have a mother. And so not having that, I felt abandoned.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what abandonment was until I started realizing, like, man, like, where's mom? You know what I'm saying? And so even in my music, because I was a mama's boy. You know what I'm saying? You need that tender love and care, and not having it at that pivotal age when you are aware at night. You know what I'm saying? Like I was clearly aware of how I was feeling. You know what I'm saying? So music was a great expression for that pain.
Good. Yeah. That's
my music. Like people say, man, you play this, your sensitivity. Like, man, that's the sensitivity comes from that longing from sensitivity from a mother. And so it was an expression, like you said, it's an expression through trauma. And for me, I'm the other day I saw the TV One special of Kirk Franklin. As great as he went through a very, like, he was abandoned not just by his mom, his dad too.
Yeah, he has a very interesting and what's it called, uplifting story that gives us all hope.
Listen,
you know, it's inspiring.
That thing was inspiring, man. I was like, okay, like if he can make it, I can make it. You know what I'm saying? Like, because his was like, that's serious. You know, to go through that and feel, and not, it led to him making some bad decisions. Like, and we're all human, so it's part of life. And that trauma, I was fortunate to survive some waves of bad decisions, and I'm here I am today because, you know, of all what was instilled in me with the time I did have with my mom and dad. So, you know, but there are people who don't have that, and so we are constantly. You mentioned a couple of them, like they didn't have that outlet or that balance of learning. Like I have all this gift, you know, and I hate to keep referring to Superman. And then there's the Clark Kent where nobody knows beyond their super gifts. Yeah, man. Nobody cares about, and they suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And so it's just my heart goes out to even the new generation coming up who are kind of bypassing the process, and because social media gives you easy access. Like people get to be introduced to your gift without. Like you there, boom, and you're popular, and then you become getting into this wave, and then your issues start becoming magnified, and then the world is seeing your issues, and
then you know what happens, which is sad and unfortunate, is I remember the day in June where Michael Jackson passed away, and I think we were at a conference at Manpower. And everybody's phones started going off, right? Phones were going off, and okay, and you're like, okay, and then it's like, oh man, Michael Jackson passed away. This happened at like 6:50, or it was late in the evening in Dallas, you know. So text, and everybody's looking at their phone, and there was mourning. And then the stage manager said, okay, all right, we got to get ready to go. And we got 3 minutes, so I need everybody in places. And you know what happened? Everybody got in place, and life continued on.
Wow.
And that lesson right there really, really taught me a valuable lesson, just in terms of, one, not just self-care and preservation, but our responsibility really to help each other as we should. Because guess what? You will be the most talented person in the world. People will love you and adore you, and guess what? They will mourn you, but life will move on.
Bye-bye. Quick.
That quick. Like 3 minutes. We got to go live, and we need everybody to be in place.
Listen, just the whole thing with Nipsey Hussle.
Yeah.
His death was so powerful because it sends waves beyond race, religion, political belief. It was so many people, like, you know what I'm saying? Off of that one, but then you were able to get a magnifying glass into his life, like how much substance was in. I didn't know who Nipsey Hussle was until after, like for real.
Yeah.
But now it shifts into why I titled this podcast the shift to significance.
Okay.
It shows how significant his life he lived, and that's the life I chose. That conversation we had in the coffee house, I had a paradigm shift. It was like, yo, I can live a life of success and chase after all this success, But like you said, after you die, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
That success is just it's gone. It's a highlight. It's gone.
Yeah, your awards will collect dust wherever they are.
But significance will last way longer
Very true.
after your death.
Very true.
And so I was like, I want to live a life of significance now.
Right.
Like I can go and chase the biggest of stages and stuff like that. But like you said, like we've seen all these cases where these people were popular, loved, and all that stuff and successful.
Mm-hmm.
But after they died, it's gone, non-significant. So now every decision, every walk, every relationship, every connection, everything I do is after going for significance. Like the people we pour into.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
When I hear you say a life of significance, what really resonates with me is a life in the really I'm inclined to say a life in the spirit. But when I talk about the spirit of a thing, and the spirit, like when the spirit of something is left behind, it never dies.
Wow, that's great.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what significance is.
Wow, that's great.
So as we can say in a scriptural context, Jesus says, if I don't go away, then the comforter can't come. So basically, I'm not leaving you without significance, without my significance being here in the flesh, being left with you. Let me put it that way. You know what I mean? So like with that in mind, that's what that means for us. Like, to where significance in the spirit, for our spirits and wills to live on, it means that one, starting with our family and our children, you know, we leave them with something, teachable lessons in life. You know, wisdom.
Just talking about,
you know, all of that good stuff. You know, same thing like what Nipsey Hussle did. It appears to do. What it appears that he did was he was an example. That he left an example. He left an example. This is how you take care of your neighborhood. This is how you take care of people. This is how we overcome obstacles. This is how, and it's the spirit of the hustle. The spirit of the hustle that lives on. Like, you know what I mean? That's like, so great. And when you talk about, I guess, this whole life of significance, I'm gonna say this one last thing. It's something that I learned early on, that there's one thing that can never be killed. Well, you can kill my body. Like, you know, and my body can be no longer. You can erase my words and they can no longer be heard. I was like, but the one thing you can never kill is you can never kill a man's will. A man's will can outlive him for generations.
Wow.
That Constitution is a bunch of men's wills. That it lives for generations among generations. It's the law, a will. So if you got a physical will, or if you got a written will, that written will can stand as long as it needs to, you know, because you can't kill a man's will. That's where our significance is. It's in our own will. So what we need to stop doing is trading our wills with the will of others. Because it's, you know, that's what we do every day. We take the will of the pastor, or we take the will of the politician, or of the governor, or the will of the president, and we exchange it for our will, and then we die without significance. Because, like, so then what do you will? Okay. Now, this is when, since we're Christians and we're having this discussion, this is when it becomes real important for us to take on this position and this pattern. Well, not my will, but Lord, your will be done. All right, what is his will? We get his will from reading the scripture, right? So his will is simple things to me, like I talked about earlier: love without dissimulation. You know, a soft answer turns away wrath. This is his will. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, like, which means love yourself, bruh. He's telling you, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So love yourself first, then you can love your neighbor.
But you know, I found that a struggle for so many people. Don't really love themselves.
This is very true.
Like, we were just talking about energy. Like, you know, we've been around bad energy and we've been around good energy. And it's like, what I've learned about being around people with bad energy, they don't love themselves.
Yeah, this is so true.
That's the root. And I'm just like, yo, like, just even we see it in social media, people who post negative stuff and always got stuff to say. They just don't take time to, you know, love you. So they can't love someone else because they don't love themselves. And so I have a little bit more compassion towards people with that type of energy because there's a root. It's honestly,
well, yeah, definitely a root because it's crazy. Like this is the whole thing about love. We both are married, so we stood in front of the altar and they had that ring.
Yeah,
and they talked about the love. The ring represents the circle of love.
Infinite. Yep.
Yeah, it's an infinite circle that should never be broken.
Mm-hmm.
But what the enemy has done is he has broken the circle in the minds of people through fatherlessness, through motherlessness, through abandonment, through allowing people to at least have this whole idea that I'm alone in this world when you truly aren't.
Mm-mm.
So if you haven't experienced the love from someone else, sometimes it's a little difficult for you to just simply love yourself, because in loving yourself, then you have something to give back out to somebody else.
Wow.
So, which is why we're blessed to have wives that love us, because they love us, we love them. They love us, or how about they love us, we love ourselves, then we love them. They love themselves, then they love us. And you see what happens, and it goes back and forth, and it's that circle. But when that whole dynamic is not healthy and it's not happening, as it is not happening for a lot of people, then we end up in the world that we got, with divisions.
Listen. Divorce and all that stuff. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit because you touched something and I was like, we need to talk about that.
Okay.
As married men, where we seeing a lot of marriages fail. People marry for love, and when they realize that's not what marriage is about. Well, you gotta love yourself. Like if you don't love yourself, no matter what you do or chase after, you're not going to find it, because it's within, you know what I'm saying? And so healthy marriages is stemmed out of self-love. Like, because
absolutely.
I realized before I married my wife, it's like, we was just talking about, I need a better half. I need to be, I need somebody to make me whole. And I realized, no, bruh, you got to be whole first.
Yep.
And she got to be whole.
It helps if y'all are.
Because you two halves together ain't going to make no whole in no marriage.
Yeah, like two halves is two halves. I mean, and mathematically it should be one whole, but oftentimes it doesn't work.
It doesn't. It doesn't. So I realized that before I married my wife, there were certain healthy aspects or healthy mindsets, certain things in my mind that I had to learn. I had to really dig deep. It's like how I was raised and what I viewed as love. And, you know what I'm saying? And what she viewed as love. And my wife talked about it a little bit in our podcast. Is like, our upbringing played a part in how we were attracted to each other. And so I realized that there's some people who get married or be together for the wrong reasons. Like, and it's concerning. It's like, you have to love yourself. You have to have that identity. And then if you don't have none of that, you have to be transparent and real enough to address it.
Yeah.
You can't just sweep it under the carpet like, I'm totally broken. I don't care. I'm just going to live broken in my marriage.
Yeah.
And raise kids as a broken individual. Like, and I see that, and kids, it just creates the cycle. Like, if we are not taking time investing in ourselves and becoming better people, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I agree. I think that, I'm 100% on board with everything you say. The idea of love is different than the true sacrifice of love that has to come forward in marriage. Another thing is like, a marriage is a commitment. It's a commitment. Of course, we say till death do us part. It's a lifelong commitment that one makes to walk a road with this one individual. I'm not going to be committed to everybody. I'm just going to be committed to you, right? And with that in mind, it teaches you how to continue to love, because like love, there's sacrifice in love is a tenet. Freedom is a tenet of love. You know what I mean? So like when you love somebody, you have to allow that person to be freely who they really are. Man. That's what love is. Like,
you touching all the stuff, because I'm gonna do another podcast with my wife concerning, and this is kind of a preview. It's calling the Art of War and Compromise.
So all right.
Listen, the Art of War and Compromise, because I mentioned before, I was like, I want to marry somebody I can go to war with, not physical, but I mean like life is tough, and you need to be somebody that you can go to war with, and like let's think about it. Like when you go to war, your team, your captain, your crew, these are your brothers. These are the people that you trust.
Yeah.
Like when all hell breaks loose,
Yeah.
you know they got your back.
Yeah.
You can't go to war with somebody you can't trust.
Yeah. Well, this is very true. My wife is in the Army. So,
Literally.
literally. So, I mean, they have what they call these battle buddies,
Yeah.
you know, but then they also have the Soldier's Creed,
Wow.
which is so important. And, you know, and they have principles that govern their activity, both in the field and off the field.
That is
you know,
great stuff.
Then the one that we all know is never leave a fallen soldier in battle. You never leave them. Like, you know, now they do that in the military, but that should be our
life.
That should be our lifelong the responsibility to our spouses.
Yes, sir.
You know, to our friends.
Yes,
like,
sir.
yo, man, I'm not leaving a fallen soldier in battle. And the only way that you can really get to that level generally is like, yo, you do have to be whole and healthy.
Truth.
As an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, understanding like, oh, okay, you know, like there will be times where you'll be down. You don't kick down like your battle buddy.
Bruh. But there's a lot of that. And I was looking at, you know, just people's conducts, like, you know, just on social media, and this social media displays so much. I just like, man, you're just one living issue. Like, bruh, get it together.
Bro.
Like, you see it all displayed on the screen.
It's become the tool of expression.
Bruh.
You know, not the cause, but it's an effect. Like,
Man,
you know what I mean? Where
there's no respect. There's no, like, yo, we call back in the G code. Like, there's a G code, like in our single days. There ain't none of that now. Like, bro, this is lines crossing everywhere. And so that even raising our kids in that, you know, and how do we keep our kids shielded from it? Or not necessarily shielded, but like the reality, like, yo, those basic principles we raised, like, you know, you honor your mother and your father, so your days will be prolonged. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was what I was instilled with.
Yeah, principle. I mean, it's getting back to principle, but then, you know, it all starts with teaching at home, you know, in the broader context of the world. A lot of my work that I do with the fatherless and with different organizations all over the world, I discovered this one thing, that society was not meant to be a father. Law enforcement wasn't meant to be a father. Government wasn't meant to be a father. You know, these items, these you know, societal idioms weren't meant to be or to replace family or anything like that.
Wow.
So what really needs to happen at home is the work that you and I, that we can do as African American men in our home, but then just really to encourage men of all races and all places and ethnicities to be like a father present at home, because that's very important for our sons and our daughters. Like, you know what I mean? And that's the, you know, it's getting back to the principle thing and teaching them at home, so that in that way, when they have to interact with the digital world and be a digital citizen, then, you know what, I'm not going to post a half nude picture of my body to our girls or to our men, the males. Like, you know, I'm not going to say these types of things about people. I'm not going to condone this type of behavior, you know, and so on and so forth, because they've been taught at home the right thing.
We could talk about hours, because you dancing into something that is scaring me as a father of a daughter, because their realities are different than our realities. We didn't have to deal with the LGBTQ community as strong growing up. And then we talking about love.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's fine. It's fine. But now we're talking about love. Mm-hmm. And so we got to teach them love, even though we were raised Christian, and say, yo, this is wrong, but we still got to love them. Mm-hmm. But their reality is that, yo, they go to school with them now. Yeah, like they're constantly, they might be approached by them and stuff like that. So we have to prepare them like, yo, this is not way we were raised, even though we still got to love them and not shun on them. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though most of the world don't teach that, like you just, you know, you gay, you lesbian, this and that, and we don't mess with you. No. As our role, we still have to love them, even though we know the word declares this is not what it's accordance to what we're, the scriptures. This is
Sure,
wrong. So,
sure.
but we still got to love you.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of, because no one is perfect. There's no sin greater than the other.
No.
And so, we gotta treat the whoremonger along with the lesbian the same way, or the wife beater, the drunkard, the drug addict, all that stuff. It's still the same. We gotta love them all the same, even though in their wrong and in their sin. And so we kind of have to, in this difficult time we're in, we got to kind of raise our kids to understanding that, because if we don't, they're going to be thrown in like a jungle.
Well, to that point, I think that because there are so many various and varying degrees of really understanding the difference between what's going on in society versus what's going on in the Bible versus sometimes what's going on in the church,
Lord,
all at the same time. What I've done with my children is as it relates to principle, like love is a foundational principle.
Yeah.
We love all people.
Yeah.
Care, gay, straight, oxymoron, hate, love all people, right? This is what we do. We love all people. I've also distinguished for them the difference between our stance or what we believe as Christians following scripture and what the law says. Now, I don't believe in breaking the law.
Yeah.
All right. So if it's the law of the land, it's the law of the land. Yeah. I can't do anything about it. And neither do I care to. And this is the whole thing. Like when gay marriage became a thing, we had a discussion in our home because my kids had some questions, and they had some very interesting questions. And what I thought I thought their questions were valid, and they wanted to understand why is it that like Christians hate gays. This was the question that came. Wow. And that was based on their perception of rhetoric that they had heard from in different types of spaces and places and people. And we live in the Bible Belt here now too. And one of the things I explained to them, I said, that's not the case. And that's definitely not the case for me. I said, but what I do want you to understand is like, I don't think that anybody should be telling anybody who they can or cannot marry.
Wow.
And the reason why is because that means they would be able to tell me I couldn't marry your mother.
True. So
like, then that means then we wouldn't have this beautiful family that we have. Yeah, all right. So that's a legal thing. Now, this is the thing, I know this is going to rub maybe a few people the wrong way, and I'm okay with that because I'm saying this in love. If I take out the few scriptures that exist in the Bible, it's only a handful of scriptures that even address like homosexuality and any of that stuff. If I take out those things, we just remove those and put those to the side. All right. There's still nothing in the Bible that tells me that type of behavior is okay. Yeah. All right. I'm not gay bashing right now. No. I'm really speaking specifically from like what the scripture says. And clearly, when we look at what Jesus Christ did for us, he addressed a whole multitude of things. Verily, verily, I say unto you, if you read the King James, and if you read any other the version of the Bible, he say, you've heard it before, but now you hear it now. Yeah. All right. He could have addressed that one thing. He didn't address it. So like it goes unaddressed. Now, should I fill in the lines and say, well, God forgot me and I should interpret it? Like, no, because then that means we would all get the color in the lines with a whole bunch of things that are not addressed. And I just don't believe that. I think that we ought to love our neighbor as ourselves. True. Everybody is my neighbor. Yeah. So period. Like, I have all kinds of friends. I have friends that are gay and I have friends that are straight. Yeah. I got friends that are Buddhist. I got friends that are Islamic. You know what? And I love them. I love my neighbor as I love myself. I was like, of which there is no such law against that. Yeah. It can't even be governed. Like
you can't govern. That's real. And that's why I wanted to bring that out, because it's like, we got to teach that principle to our kids. And as you teach, and I'm teaching to my daughter, because my daughter goes into a very diverse school. Sure. And that's intentional. You know what I'm saying? Because we live in a very, very diverse world.
Yeah. We don't live in a one. That's what, and I don't like the school. We don't live in like a one type stop shop one mindset
Yeah.
type society.
No, and
know?
so and I feel that my wife and I agree, like, we need to be very intentional in raising her in a very diverse culture because the world is diverse, and keep her mind open. You know what I'm saying? I want to, and she has white friends, she has black friends, she has Indian friends, she has all kind, and it brings so much joy, and especially moving to Dallas because Dallas is like a melting pot, you know, and so that's the love your neighbor as like love everyone, and so I'm so glad that we were very intentional in that, and so. You know, as we close this, I really want to, to just thank you again for being a part of this, this podcast, brother, man. Thank you. You really blessed me, and very inspired me. I mean, and to do this podcast and do a bunch of other stuff. I really hope that, as we continue to grow and continue to move and live a life of significance, we will continue to add value to people. Like, you add value to me, and I hope I can add value to you, add value to everybody around us, man. But I'm so glad we had that conversation that night. It was a simple conversation, but it will open me up because I was a very vulnerable place. Yeah, I felt I was in the place of being devalued, stepped on, and it was a familiar place because I've been there. And I realized I couldn't blame nobody. Wow. I had to blame me because I'm grown. I put myself in this position. Yeah. I didn't look or valued myself. Yeah. But I was seeking value from someone else. Yeah, I do remember that. And that conversation woke me up and say, yo, you looking for him to value, or you looking for that organization to value you? You don't even value yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think that when I woke up and came to that realization, like, yo, what am I doing? Yeah. I gotta. All right, stop. Let me get myself together. Yeah, Let me love myself. Let me value myself, and then walking that value. And not be arrogant. You don't have to be arrogant. I can still be humble. I can still be that, but you know your worth, and not allow people to devalue or take advantage of you. So, I was thankful that conversation was a very great conversation, and so we're here today, man. I love you, man. I appreciate you. I love your family, too, man. Yeah, man. And I'm excited for the future, man. I'm excited for just every step we take, every project we step into is a project to add significance. I know you're working on new projects. Yeah, man. Jamar Jones Out Loud coming to you 2019, 2020. Hopefully, man, very, very, very soon. I'm excited. He let me hear a snippet, man. I ain't gonna listen. There's music. I know we gotta end this, but listen, there's music that helps you escape. Like, and he started playing it, and I just went into a space. Like, the music felt, and this was like the early draft. This ain't the finished draft. He was playing it and he was talking. I just totally just zoned out into a place of imagination. Like, I was just in dream world, and I was like, yo, I can't wait for this stuff to come out, man. So look out for Jamar Jones' new stuff coming out, and follow him on his social media and all his platforms. And just for those who already follow him, you know he does great stuff, man. But he's really, like I said, I admire how he balances all this great stuff that he does and still take time for his family, and so. Thank you for being that example, and I appreciate it. And so, thank you for having me, man. I'm so glad you came, man. Bro. I appreciate it, man. Like, thank you for taking the call to come do this, man. And I talked about before. I struggle with asking people for stuff, and I struggled to call you and say, yo, bro, can you do this podcast? But I'm glad I got over it though. Yeah, I got over it, man, because it's like, yo, sometimes you got busy schedule. I don't feel, but I'm glad that I called and you answered and we made it happen. And that says a lot. I'm gonna say this one last thing. Our good friend Adam Blackstone, he said, BBE. He said this to me one time, and this is indicative of him. He says, man, I ask for anything, because he said all they can say is no. And if they say no, it's simple. Hold up, check this out. He said if a person says no, I still have the same thing I had before they said no. Lose nothing. I didn't lose anything. You didn't lose nothing. I was just like, yo, so like, yeah, that's it. So like, I've kind of adopted that myself. That's great stuff, man. That's great stuff. Listen, I appreciate your time. Again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the Coffeehouse Conversations. Subscribe, tune in, spread the word, share this with somebody. Let's get the word out. We're here trying to add value to people, and I guarantee that this is all about adding value to you. So until next time, thank you for listening, and thank you for listening to the Coffeehouse Conversations. Next time.